back and it becomes abundantly clear that Ukraine is finished. I mean, it's already obvious to anybody who visits the place for any length of time. It's in ruins. But once that occurs, I fear that there will be pressure to commit U.S. forces in Poland and Romania, along with Polish forces and potentially Romanian ones, to Western Ukraine. And if that occurs, the gloves will come off because, truthfully, thus far, Putin has exercised tremendous restraint, tremendous patience. He does not want a war with the West. If he wanted that, we'd already have it. But if we intervene in Western Ukraine, it's over. We'll be in a full-fledged war.
Was sort of the excuse that they needed. I mean, it is as though we were goading him into this to begin with. And, you know, what are your thoughts on all of that?
I think we grossly miscalculated. Putin had made several speeches over the last 20 years, repeatedly saying, please do not advance the border to Russia. Do not try to transform Ukraine into a hostile actor, an actor with hostile intentions towards Russia. What happens in Ukraine is of existential strategic interest to us, just as theoretically what happens in Mexico is of existential strategic interest to us, although this administration has decided to ignore it. That's going to come back to haunt us, and if you're looking for future conflict, that's where to look for it, not in Europe and not in Asia. But the point is that Putin wasn't pulling any wool over anyone's eyes, and Putin absolutely didn't want a war. If you go back and look at the force that he sends into Ukraine earlier in February of 2022, he goes in with about 90,000 troops. He limits his advances to the periphery because he expected that we would negotiate, that he would demonstrate that this was serious and that Russia wanted its population in eastern Ukraine, which is really Russian, to have equal rights before the law. He wanted to end the oppression of the Russians that lived there. And he wasn't going to surrender Crimea. The reason he went into Crimea is he was afraid it was going to be turned into a U.S. naval base by the Ukrainians at the earliest opportunity. He wasn't going to allow that to happen. Now, he went along and thought that he might get a negotiated settlement, and he finally figured out after several months, nobody's going to talk to me, especially after Biden said, our goal is regime change. Our goal is to get rid of Putin. And our goal is ultimately to divide Russia into constituent parts, then exploit it. All of his supporters, his staffers, everyone in the globalist camp knows this is the truth. The so-called oligarchs, Kolomoisky, Soros, and others are all part of this. None of this is news. Finally, he said, enough's enough. He stopped. They set up a strategic defense. They ran an economy of force mission, and now they have a force in place that can go as far as it needs to go, which includes to the Polish border. They have a plan for a 31-month war against us if we insist on fighting it. And we are in no shape to fight a war. We can't even recruit for the United States Army or the Marines. The Marines are running around trying to recruit illegals and are being encouraged to do so by the administration. Is that what you want in the ground force to fight for this country? Forget it. It's not going to work.
To me, and maybe to the uneducated on the subject, it feels like maybe one of the bigger sort of miscalculations or underperformances of recent military history. Is that not the case, or is that also a combination of it? Did he, misjudge some of it, or is that just because, 130 billion in missiles given to a militia, can still hold back someone who's not going all out, or using tactical nukes or whatever it may be, that next escalation where he could again take over the country rather quickly?
Russia is not the Soviet Union. Russia is an Orthodox Christian country that is rooted in Russian nationality, history, culture, language, and ethnicity. So forget the Soviet Union. Ukraine is a brother Slavic country. The last thing Putin wanted to do was destroy Ukraine. Putin would have been perfectly happy to have Crimea recognized, to gain those equal rights for Russians inside eastern Ukraine, and to declare the place neutral. Because the neutral Ukraine would have provided exactly what you're discussing, not only a buffer for NATO and the West, a buffer for